need to take a break from the house, which I was warned about before investigating. So I went to go outside, and as I was going outside, a cat ran in, which, I mean, that scared me because I'm already in that zone of like, oh my God, what is happening to my mood and my brain? Went outside, calmed down, come back in, thinking about what's going on with the cat, and I felt something touch me on the back.
For the past several years, Amy has been investigating the paranormal all over the world, sharing her explorations via her YouTube channel and website, Amy's Crypt. An experienced investigator who, along with her husband Jared, created and manages the popular GhostTube suite of apps, she is one of the foremost female authorities in paranormal fieldwork, having built a reputation grounded in authenticity and integrity. I have been fortunate to work with Amy before in the past, and consider myself lucky to regard her as one of my dear friends. Last summer, we finally had the chance to meet in person. It was a weekend I'll always remember. So please enjoy this interview we filmed together, which I hope will provide many fascinating insights into both Amy and her experiences as a paranormal investigator. Then, when you're finished, I very strongly recommend you visit her channel so as to see what we got up to when we visited Bron Y Garth together, an old Victorian hospital, mortuary and workhouse said to be swarming with spirits of the dead. Enjoy. So what is your stance on life after death, your belief?
Oh, that's a really hard question because I've been immersed in the paranormal world for so long, and I started more on the skeptical side. So after having an experience where I saw something which could be described as a ghost, I saw a little girl, and many people in the paranormal would describe her as a full-bodied apparition because she was solid like you or me. But the longer I've been doing this, the more I've become open not only to the idea of ghosts, but possibly other entities. And I don't know what happens when we die. Do we go somewhere else? Do we linger? Does our soul or our spirit, whatever you like to call it, what really happens? Like, am I even communicating with ghosts? A lot of the time, I like to believe so, like I'm talking to a ghost or a spirit or someone who was formerly alive, formerly living. But at the end of the day, I don't know. And I think that's what has dragged me deeper into the paranormal, that not knowing and wanting more answers. So I don't have a solid stance on it. All I can tell you is I believe that there's something going on out there. I can't definitively say what it is.
So do you think that doing Amy's Crypt, that your opinion has changed over the years?
For sure. So as I said, I started and I was very skeptical, and I think the longer that I've been doing it and the deeper I've gone down the rabbit hole, I'm a lot more open, especially when strange things happen around me. I used to just sort of discount that and just think, it couldn't be, it can't be. But these days I'm a little bit more like, okay, let me try and think of any possible reason for this to happen that could be on a natural spectrum. Sometimes it's hard, and I don't discount it that it isn't necessarily paranormal anymore. I'm a bit more open to thinking, yeah, okay, that's something, this happened, and I can present that as is. So
do you think then that trusting that intuition, that first instinct that maybe you need to look a little bit deeper is really important then?
I do, and I think that's been what's held me back as an investigator as well on my own journey, where I'm sort of developing this and understanding more where I need to trust myself, because a lot of the times I might think something or feel something, hear something, smell something, or even just as sort of an atmosphere. It's hard to explain when you go into a location and you're like, oh, this place just feels off, or this place might make me feel a little bit sick, or I've got a pain in my head. And I used to never want to share that kind of stuff because I don't know that it's paranormal. Now I like to share it and kind of document it, and whether it is paranormal or not, it's always hard to say, but I just I like to share it because who knows, it could be something. And I think that maybe I'm still held back a little bit by the possibility, it could just be I've got a sore back tonight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Is there an experience that stands out in your mind as being really profound for you?
Yes, that would be probably what got me into the paranormal. I like to say it was my first paranormal experience, and To me, I like to say it was a ghost sighting. I don't know that it actually was. So a couple of years ago, my husband and I moved to San Francisco. We were in our apartment, which was inside an old Victorian house. It dates back to the 1890s. I don't know too much about the house and the property, but one night, all I know is I woke up to see a little girl standing in the hallway, and as I said, she was full-bodied apparition, so she looked like a real person. And I always thought, you know, if you see a ghost in the middle of the night, or you see a ghost at all, like, it would be a scary experience, and I didn't feel scared at all. Like, I almost felt calm, but a little bit in disbelief, like, I don't have kids, why is there a kid in, like, my living space? And then in disbelief, I guess I rubbed my eyes, opened them back up, and she was gone. It was like someone had turned off a light. She was just gone. And I've always, I guess a part of me that was questioning that was always like, was that something? Was it not? And then a couple of years later, I did get a bit of validation because I was, you know, talking to my husband's father, and he told me, oh yeah, a couple of years ago, I seen something in your apartment. I saw a little girl, and him not knowing about my sighting of her made that so compelling to me. So always chasing that. I want that to happen again so bad.
Do you think that's a big misconception within the paranormal, about things always being scary?
I do. I personally, I love scary stuff. Like, I always grew up really obsessed with horror movies, and especially Halloween. Like, I grew up in Australia, and Halloween's not really a thing back there, so I was so obsessed with, and even, you know, the Simpsons episodes with Halloween, so obsessed, loved it. And I think for me, that might have been a part of what got me into the paranormal, but the longer I've been in it, I know that it's not all demons and scary things. Like, sometimes you could get scared, or sometimes you can get taken back because you're in a dark room, you might hear something or even see something that could frighten you, but it's not necessarily like it is evil, you know what I mean? So I think if we think about ghosts and we think of them as they are former people, sure, they're a good and they're a bad people, but are they really evil people? And like, is that majority of the people that exist evil, you know? So I think that people can misconstrue it into being scary or evil or bad, and it's definitely not necessarily all that.
Have you had an experience though that's been particularly scary for you?
Yes. I've had quite a few. One of the recent ones I can think of was I stayed at the Villisca Axe murder house in the United States. A terrible, terrible crime happened there, and the place is scary just because of that. But I think because so many investigators and so many people have passed through this house throughout the years, it's really brought in a lot of different energies. So it's not necessarily there is an axe murderer still in the house, and there's not necessarily there is, you know, the people who were murdered there all those years ago still lingering, but it feels like there's something else there as well. And I can't tell you what that is, but the place terrified me. During our investigation, we were reaching out, doing a bunch of experiments, and things were happening, but not sort of on like that real crazy level where you're like, wow. And then it got to one point in the night, and I was just packing stuff up to move downstairs to conduct our next experiment. I wasn't really thinking about being in the investigation mode. Our cameras were off, and I was kind of just hit with this emotion, and it was overwhelming sadness. And I literally started to cry, and I'm not normally an overly emotional person when I investigate, and I just started to cry, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. And I went down the stairs, I sat down to take a breather, then I got to a point where I'm like, I need to take a break from the house, which I was warned about before investigating. So I went to go outside, and as I was going outside, a cat ran in, which, I mean, that scared me because I'm already in that zone of like, oh my God, what is happening to my mood and my brain? Went outside, calmed down, come back in, thinking about what's going on with the cat, and I felt something touch me on the back, which freaked me out. A couple of seconds later, I heard a really loud noise downstairs. That scared me. So we go downstairs and realize I've left the door open because we're trying to get the cat out. And then just from there, like, the mood changed, and we're getting a lot more responses through. Our light went dead, batteries were draining on things, and it just all kind of kicked off in that one short, probably over the course of like 40 minutes in the night, just so much happened, and that really had me on edge. That's one place that I've been like, I don't want to sleep here. Normally I'll sleep anywhere. I was like, I can't sleep in this house I ended up sleeping there, but I was terrified. I'll admit it, like, hand on heart, I was so scared.
Would you say that's the most active place you've been to?
Over the years, I've been to a lot of active places. That's one place that I think stands out in my mind because it personally affected me in ways that I haven't necessarily been personally affected at other places. But other places we have had activity, so it's hard to gauge, like, is this place more haunted than this place? You know, is this the most haunted? Is this? Because you might go on a night and not really get anything, and then you could go another day and that same place could be active as hell. So we're sharing some stories earlier, and we have had poltergeist activity where things have moved before our eyes at locations. So I don't know if that makes that particular place more haunted than Villisca, but Villisca, it's up there for me, definitely.
Is there a particular location that you would love to investigate that you haven't had the chance to yet?
See, this is a hard question because there's so many places that I would love to, and a lot of places that I really wanted to that were high on my bucket list. If you asked me this start of the year, I probably would have said Waverly Hills Sanatorium. That place I've always wanted to go to. Now I've done it, so I'm like, oh, like, what next? So I think the answer to that question will always be somewhere like the Tower of London, where they don't necessarily allow paranormal investigations through there, but I'm sure a place such as that, the history there, it would make for a juicy investigation, and especially because it's not really investigated, it would be a very interesting place, but I don't think I'll ever get to do that.
Are you ever surprised by a location? So, for example, you mentioned like the Tower of London. There's a lot of expectation that would be really haunted. Have you ever gone somewhere where it's just been dead and it hasn't lived up to what you thought?
There's definitely been places where we've gone and been a little bit sort of disappointed, just because every time I go out for an investigation, I'll be excited as hell, and I'm like, yes, something's going to happen, I'm going to see something, something's going to happen. And there's so many places that you leave and you're like, oh, nothing happened. So I'd say like more places often than not have less activity, but I've learned to kind of get excited about and really more interested in the subtleties, because I don't think the paranormal can always be plates flying across the room or, you know, full-bodied apparitions. Like for me, I've only seen one of those. Shadow figures and stuff I've seen, but they're a lot more rare. So I try to hold on to things, like even if it's, you know, a response for a spirit box, and it might only be one word that seems relevant in the moment. I'm like, you know what, in retrospect, that was pretty cool that happened. So any little thing, even if it's a tap on the wall, I'm like, oh, that was something.
Do you have a favourite experiment, one that you think you get a lot of results from?
Something that my husband and I do a lot of, so we've developed a couple of apps. So we've got GhostTube, GhostTube Box, GhostTube SLS, and I might be biased if I say that they're my favourite, so like, you don't come for me. But I definitely like to use the first app that we created, so we just call it GhostTube Original. And I think that the reason why I like to use that is, and I've heard this said from other investigators and their favourite pieces of equipment, is they have a specific device that they use all the time, and I don't know if it's like the personal connection of the device, but to me, using my own phone in an investigation, I feel like my phone is so closely linked to me. I use it so much, it's always with me. So using that on an investigation helps me feel a bit closer to the investigation, and just some of the responses we've had for it have blown my mind, that I'm literally like, it's more than a coincidence to me to get the name of, you know, the person who died here and who is said to haunt here at multiple venues, like come through at a time that makes sense through the device. So I really enjoy that. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's my favourite.
The more you investigate the paranormal, do you feel that you're getting more sensitive to picking up on things, particularly like physical sensations? I
definitely think the more that you do it, whether it's you yourself are becoming more open or susceptible, or it's you're learning to sort of embrace that and realise that and pay attention to it. So I think me now as an investigator versus me years ago, after doing it for so long, I definitely feel more open to it, where I'm more confident in myself to say, hey, I'm feeling this, or I'm thinking this, or I think that we should go this way. And I've definitely had moments where I felt very in tune with either a location. Villisca was one, for instance. I was having dreams about that place up to 6 months before we even went. And some of the things that we got through seemed to link in with the dreams that I was having. I don't know why. It could just be completely in my head, but just feeling in tune with certain places, and maybe you just get that connection with places more. I don't claim that I'm sensitive or psychic, clairvoyant, anything like that, but I definitely think the more I do this, the more I understand what I'm feeling, and have tried to learn to trust that as much as I can.
So do you think we all have that within us potentially then, to get in tune with ourselves in our environments?
Yeah, I think there's so much about the human brain, or any brain, that we as people, we just don't understand. And we're constantly studying it and that, but a lot of psychology and that is just based on theory, which is the same as the paranormal. A lot of it's largely based in theory. And it's very hard to prove or test or measure certain things. So I think that there's definitely parts of our brain that could be unlocked in some people and not others, or that can be unlocked in some certain sense. But I definitely think, that everyone has something. I feel like anyone could. It doesn't necessarily mean everyone does, but anyone could.
When you meet with members of the public at these locations, like the tour guides, for example, do you think that more people than not have had experiences?
I definitely do. And, we'll go to some places and oftentimes I'll interview, or at least just talk to the people who are chaperoning us or letting us through, or work there in a tour guide capacity. And even the ones that say to me, I don't believe in ghosts, I'm a skeptic, usually after a while of talking to them, they will come out with something and say, I don't believe in ghosts, but this one time. And, I had this recently where I was talking to a guy at an old castle, and he was great, very into the history, and he's like, I'm more into the history side, I don't really think about the ghosts, and I've never had anything happen here. Except on this one staircase, I seen something, and he just couldn't say what it was, and it tied into the history of the place. He said it looked like a monk, and it was he gave me so much of a description of what he saw that it was so odd. So it's always interesting to talk to those type of people, because they make the most sense to have had experiences at these very haunted places, because they're the ones spending the most time there. So whether it's like someone has a lot of experiences, maybe it's because they're more open to it, or they've only had the one because they're a bit more closed off, or sort of reject it a little bit more.
So many of the places that you visit, they obviously advertise that the location is haunted, and they open up these locations to people such as yourself or tour groups. Do you think that has an effect on the location?
I definitely feel as though it does, and there are some theories in the paranormal where it's not necessarily haunted by something, but because so many people have come in with the same belief and brought that energy, and they've almost created that haunting into existence, if that makes sense. So I mean, Velisco is a great example of that. I don't know that it's just the family who died there haunting it. Even the guy he's been working there for 20 years, living next door to the place and investigating it actively a lot himself, he doesn't believe that the family who died there all these years ago are the ones haunting it. He said to me, Amy, it feels like the house is haunting itself. So that always sticks in my head, and I'm like, it is an interesting thought. Anywhere could be haunted, and whether it's because it's just a place where spirits just pass through and it's just haunted that one night, I don't know, or spirits cling there, whether it's a person or an object that has an attachment. So I find it interesting. I guess if a lot of people are coming in and investigating, especially bringing high emotion, let's say it's somewhere that's made out to be a very scary location, so people are coming in with fear every night, it could make the place feel scarier.
Have you ever had anything follow you from a location?
I feel like I've definitely had things happen to me at home, or even right now I've been on the road for close to 5 months traveling and just filming every couple of nights for my YouTube channel. So I've been to a lot of locations, and sometimes when I go back to the hotels, it still feels like I'm somewhere haunted, and sure, the hotel could be haunted, but whether something's still around me. One particular instance I can recall, I went to North Carolina and I investigated an old battleship. And I was talking to one of my friends who I actually investigated there with that night, and she said to me, you know, when I go to Wilmington, something always follows me home. It always feels like I take energy home. And after our investigation at the battleship, I came back to the hotel room, and I was so zonked. It was early hours of the morning. I was just sitting on the end of the bed, just like, you know, like I have to go brush my teeth and wash my face before going to bed, but I just want to go to bed. I can't be bothered doing anything. And the chest of drawers right in front of me, I just watched the drawer just, and then slowly slide all the way out. And I was like, why couldn't that happen on the ship? Like, that's super, like, paranormal. Like, I don't have an explanation for that. The drawer, there's no way that thing would have just popped and slid out. It was super weird. So I always wondered, was that a spirit there with me in that moment? I don't necessarily think I have something with me right now, but I do have a lot of my followers who often tell me, hey, we think that this is following you. We think that you have an attachment. I don't see that as anything negative or feel like I'm being drained or taken over or anything bad is with me or around me.
Do you ever do any sort of protection or ritual before either going into or leaving a place?
I actually don't. And I know that freaks a lot of people out. Like, you should pray, you should do this, you should carry crystals on you. I literally don't do anything. I think for me, I have dealt with a lot of mental health issues in my past, which I try to be quite open about, and I feel like they were some of my darkest moments. So in my life now, I try to do a lot of things that keep me on a positive mindset and a positive track. So whether that could be counted as doing something to protect myself, and maybe that helps, I don't actually know, but it's not necessarily things that I do for me to cope with spirits or anything supernatural. It's more things that I do to cope with, I guess, the demons of my own brain.
You just try and be grounded in a more well-rounded sort of way.
Yeah. So nothing specific like smudging or crystals or anything like that.
And finally, thoughts and expectations for tomorrow.
Oh, I'm very excited tomorrow. I'm excited to investigate with you guys. So excited. I'm really pumped. I feel like this place, given its history, like being a hospital and workhouse, it feels like there definitely could be something lingering or some energy, whether it's trapped there or wants to stay there. So I don't know what to expect, but I guess we'll find out tomorrow.
Thank you so much for watching. As ever, I truly hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, why are you still here? Go ahead and click through to Amy's video, where she, I, Eric and Jared investigate the absolutely huge and haunted Bron Y Garth Hospital together. Thank you again. Until next time.